Photographs are usually taken to encapsulate happy moments, or in the modern world, with cameras being so accessible and digital pictures being the norm, people now take photos of mundane things like food they are about to eat. The three cases in this video all involve haunting photos that are the last photographs of people before they met a violent end. We'll talk about an assassination, a famous American murder case, and a serial killer who committed his crimes before serial killer was even a term. Before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our sponsor, Magellan TV. Magellan TV has a lot of great true crime documentaries, and the other night I watched an excellent one. It's called Night Terror: The Search for Truth, and it's about a double murder that happened in 2006 in Cape Town, South Africa. At the time, the case made headlines around the world. Night Terror is a more intimate and disturbing look at the crime. I also really enjoy Magellan TV's history documentaries about evil people. A particularly good one is called Tracking Down Klaus Barbie. It details the crimes of Klaus Barbie, who was the head of the Gestapo in Lyon, France, and then he escaped to Latin America, where he continued to commit horrifying acts of evil. Night Terror and Tracking Down Klaus Barbie are both disturbing documentaries that will stay with you for a long time. There is so much more to discover on Magellan TV. They have a bunch of documentaries that are available in 4K, and they are absolutely stunning. Magellan TV is incredibly accessible. Magellan TV can be watched anywhere, at any time, on your TV, laptop, or mobile device. You can also cast from your phone to your TV. It works with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play, just to name a few. Magellan TV has a special offer for criminally listed viewers. Just go to try.magellantv.com/criminally-listed. You'll get a month for free. So please help support Criminally Listed and find something great to watch by checking out Magellan TV. Number 3. Reynaldo Dagsa. As 2010 was coming to an end, Reynaldo Dagsa was 35 years old. He lived in Caloocan, which is a suburb of Manila, Philippines. Dagsa worked as a councilman. He was also a member of the Brungrieve Peacekeeping Action Team. The team's objective was to reduce crime in the area. The team had a reputation for being aggressive. On New Year's Eve 2010, Dagsa went to bed early and he asked his family to wake him up just before midnight. His family did as they were instructed, and then they stepped outside of their home to join in on the festivities. Dagsa had his wife, daughter, and mother-in-law pose for a photo beside the family's car. As fireworks were going off around them, Dagsa snapped several photographs of his family. Then suddenly, he fell to the ground. His confused family checked on him, and they discovered that he had been shot in the chest. They did not hear the gunshot because of the fireworks. Dagsa's family reviewed the photos he took, and they saw something shocking in one of them. On the left-hand side of the photo, there is a man with a backward baseball hat pointing a gun at Dagsa. Dagsa had inadvertently photographed his killer. The police identified the man as 26-year-old Arnel Bonaflor. Bonaflor was a member of a gang called the Passaway Gang. It turned out that another gang member was also photographed. Michael Roland is seen on the right side of the photo. He worked as a lookout for the murder. A third gang member also participated in the murder. His name is Frederick Sales, and he is not in the photograph because he was standing behind Dagsa. Sales also fired a shot at Dagsa, but he missed. Bonaflor was arrested 6 days after the murder. His two accomplices were arrested later that same day. At the time of the shooting, Bonaflor was out on bail for robbery charges. He had been arrested for those charges on the orders of Reynaldo Dagsa. Boniflor claimed that Dagsa was killed because he was tough on crime and he was violent when it came to dealing with suspected criminals. Boniflor claimed that Dagsa nearly killed him during the arrest. He said that Dagsa and his team beat him up and then Dagsa shot him in the head. Boniflor survived the shooting, but he was left with a scar. Boniflor also claimed that he had not planned on killing Dagsa that night. He said that he and his two accomplices happened upon Dagsa and they saw their opportunity to kill him. The chief of police did not believe that Boniflor and his gang acted on their own accord. He speculated that a powerful crime boss ordered the Passaway gang to kill Dagsa because of his work trying to reduce crime. But the crime lord was never identified and he was not charged in connection with Dagsa's murder. Boniflor and his accomplices were charged with murder. However, no record could be found as to what happened to them after they were charged. Number 2. Travis Alexander. Travis Alexander was born in Riverside, California on July 28, 1977. He was the third of 8 children. Both of his parents were addicted to crystal meth. His father was mostly absent. When his father was around, his parents would get into verbal and physical altercations. Alexander's mother would also physically and mentally abuse her 8 children. When Alexander was 8 years old, he started living with his grandparents. Soon after, his grandparents took in the rest of his siblings. His grandmother was a Mormon, and she taught the children about the Church of Latter-day Saints. Alexander became fascinated with Mormonism. When he was 10 years old, he was baptized. By the time he was 16, he was fully active in the church. After graduating from high school, Alexander was a missionary for 2 years in Denver, Colorado. In September 2001, when Travis Alexander was 24 years old, he started working for Prepaid Legal, which sold legal insurance policies. Legal insurance is when a person or a business pays a monthly fee and then they have access to a network of lawyers. In 2004, Alexander relocated to Mesa, Arizona, which has a large Mormon population. He made a lot of friends and he was active in the Mormon community. He continued to work for Prepaid Legal and he was successful. Out of 5,000 salespeople, he had the second best sales record. He also had his own team of associates. Alexander bought a BMW Series 3 and in July 2004, he purchased a 5-bedroom house in Mesa. The executives at Prepaid Legal were impressed with Alexander. They hired him to go around the country and give motivational speeches at seminars. Travis Alexander liked to date women. In the Church of Latter-day Saints, members are supposed to stay celibate until marriage. However, Alexander had sex with at least 2 women. In 2004, in late 2007 or early 2008, he was banned from the temple because of something he did with women. But both times his status was later reinstated. In September 2006, Travis Alexander was in Las Vegas, Nevada for a Prepaid Legal seminar. At the MGM Grand, a woman caught his eye. He introduced himself to her. She then introduced herself. Her name was Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias was born in July 1980 in Salinas, California. Arias has 3 full siblings and 1 half-sibling. As a child, she took piano lessons and played the flute. When she was 10, she got a camera and she fell in love with photography. Arias's parents noticed that something was off with their daughter. When she was young, she was defiant and she would run away from home. As a teenager, she was prone to violent mood swings. Arias's parents would physically reprimand her and her siblings. Arias considered it to be abuse and she didn't trust her parents. Arias had a habit of becoming obsessed with the young men she dated. Their hobbies and interests would suddenly become her hobbies and interests. When Arias was 17 years old, she moved out of her family home and moved in with the young man she was dating at the time. She ended up dropping out of school and she worked full-time as a waitress at Denny's. She lived with that boyfriend for about a year. Afterwards, she moved to Oregon and lived with another man. She found out that he was cheating on her, so she left him and moved to Big Sur, California. In March 2006, Arias signed up to be a prepaid legal associate. At the time, she was working as a waitress and a bartender. She lived in a house that she owned with her boyfriend, who was 20 years her senior, in Salinas, California. After meeting with a representative from Prepaid Legal, Arias didn't really think that Prepaid Legal was for her. So she continued to work as a waitress and bartender. Months later, the representative contacted her and convinced her to go to a seminar in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's where 26-year-old Jodi Arias met 29-year-old Travis Alexander. Alexander invited Arias to a black tie event for the upper echelon of Prepaid Legal the next night, and she accepted his invitation. This was their first date, and both were smitten with each other. They continued to see each other while they were in Las Vegas. When Arias returned to Salinas, she broke up with her live-in boyfriend of nearly 4 years. Alexander and Arias started a long-distance relationship. They talked to each other almost daily. They talked on the phone, sent text messages back and forth, emailed each other, and posted on each other's MySpace pages. Arias ended up converting to the Church of Latter-day Saints. In November 2006, just 2 months after meeting Alexander, she was baptized. Arias invited her family to the baptism, but none of them attended. Arias claimed that she and Alexander did sexual things early in the relationship, but they did not have intercourse. Throughout the rest of 2006, they continued to communicate and they would visit each other. At the end of 2006, Arias and her now ex-boyfriend lost their house to foreclosure, but she continued to live in Salinas. Arias and Alexander's relationship became official on February 2, 2007. After they officially started dating, Arias and Alexander went on weekend road trips together. They visited tourist attractions, museums, and places mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Many of Alexander's friends didn't realize he was dating anyone. The friends who had met Arias thought she was strange and seemed obsessed with Alexander. They also thought she was very possessive. Some of them even thought she was dangerous. Arias would often read Alexander's emails, social media messages, and text messages without his knowledge. In June 2007, she found some text messages that indicated he was cheating. They ended up breaking up at the end of June. Although they broke up, not much changed in their relationship. They continued to frequently communicate. 2 weeks after they broke up, Arias moved to Mesa. Arias later said that Alexander encouraged her to move there. Alexander's friends said the opposite and said that he discouraged her from moving near him. Alexander had started dating another woman just days after he and Arias broke up. Nevertheless, Arias rented a home less than 4 miles from Alexander's house. After moving there, and even though Alexander was dating another woman, Arias would sneak into his house a few nights a week and they would have sex. In September 2007, the woman Alexander was dating found out that he was still seeing Arias, so she broke up with him. However, a short time later, he was able to convince her to get back together. After that, Alexander noticed some odd things happening around his home. For example, he would come home and find that items had been moved or were missing. One time he came home and he found Arias inside the home. She said she got in through a doggy door. In December 2007, all 4 tires of Alexander's car were slashed. He had the tires replaced the next day. That night, his tires were slashed again. A few weeks later, Alexander's girlfriend's tires were slashed. In early 2008, Travis Alexander was having a difficult time with his finances. The economy had taken a turn for the worse, and people weren't spending money as freely as they did before. He ended up selling his BMW to Arias. He also broke up with the woman he was dating. He claimed that he broke up with her so he could get back on track financially. A few weeks later, he started dating another woman he met at church. After he started dating the new woman, Alexander again noticed odd things happening around his home. For example, someone had ripped out pages from a book he had just purchased. At the end of April 2008, Arias moved from Mesa, Arizona to Yreka, California. Even though they weren't in a relationship or living in the same city, Alexander and Arias continued to communicate via the phone, email, social media, and text messages. After moving to Yreka, Arias started dating another man. Like Alexander, he was a prepaid legal associate and a Mormon. He lived in Salt Lake City, Utah. At the beginning of May 2008, Alexander invited the woman he was dating to come to Cancun, Mexico with him. The trip was being paid for by Prepaid Legal. The woman accepted the invitation. But a few weeks before they were to go on the trip, the woman ended the relationship with Alexander. She thought that they were better off as friends. However, she was still going to go to Cancun because the tickets had been purchased in her name. Originally, Jody Arias was supposed to go with Alexander on the trip. On May 26, 2008, Alexander and Arias got into a big fight. Alexander told his friends it was because Arias had logged on to his Facebook account. Arias claimed that Alexander got mad because he saw she had commented on another man's photo. Alexander told Arias he wanted her permanently out of his life. During this time, Arias was living with her grandparents. On May 28, 2008, her grandfather came home and discovered that a door had been kicked in. He looked around the home and only 2 things had been stolen: a DVD player and a .25 caliber handgun. The police thought that the break-in was odd. There were other guns in the home and they were untouched. Also, there was money in the house sitting in plain sight and it had not been stolen. On June 2, 2008, Jody Arias rented a car. She told the person she was renting the car from that she was just going to drive it around town. On June 3rd, she stopped off at her ex-boyfriend's home and borrowed 2 gas cans. Later that day, she purchased another gas can at Walmart. She then purchased a large quantity of gas and turned off her cell phone. Arias had planned on visiting her boyfriend in Salt Lake City, which is over 750 miles from Wairika. She was supposed to arrive in Salt Lake City on the morning of June 4th, but she didn't make it. Her boyfriend called her cell phone, but his call went directly to her voicemail. Arias called her boyfriend that evening and explained she got lost and her cell phone had died. She said that she slept in her car for several hours. Arias arrived in Salt Lake City on the morning of June 5th, about 24 hours later than she was expected. Her boyfriend noticed she had 2 bandages on one of her hands. Arias said she had cut her hand at work. On June 7th, Arias dropped off her car at the place where she rented it from. The owner of the business was surprised to see she had driven nearly 3,000 miles. He also noticed some dark stains on the floor of the car. On June 9, 2008, some of Travis Alexander's friends went over to his home. The next morning, he was supposed to go to Cancun with his ex-girlfriend, but no one had heard from him in 5 days. His friends managed to get into his home. They immediately noticed a disturbing scent in the air. His friends went to his bedroom and they saw a large dried blood stain on the carpet. Travis's bedroom had its own bathroom. On the floor of a shower, they found the dead body of 30-year-old Travis Alexander. It was clear he had been brutally murdered. Travis's friends immediately called 911. The medical examiner thought that Travis had died from blood loss. He had been shot in the face with a .25 caliber handgun, stabbed 27 times, and his throat had been slit ear to ear. He had most likely died on June 4th, about 5 days earlier. The attack started in the bathroom, but he got away from his killer. He was most likely killed in the bedroom, and then his body was dragged and stuffed into the shower stall. The police searched Alexander's home. One thing that the police found was a box for a newly purchased camera, but the camera was missing from the box. They looked in the washing machine, and inside of it was the camera. The camera and the memory card inside of it were water damaged. Alexander's friends immediately suspected that Jodi Arias may have killed him. Arias was interviewed, and she denied having anything to do with the murder. A computer expert with the police checked the memory card that was found inside the camera. The photos had been deleted, but he was able to recover them. They were taken on the day that Alexander was killed. Some of the photos were of Travis Alexander in the shower. This photo was taken at 5:29 p.m., and it is the last photo of Alexander alive. Another photo was taken at 5:31, and it appears to have been taken by accident. It is an out-of-focus photo of the ceiling. Another photo was taken 62 seconds later, and it's also believed that this photo was taken by accident. The investigators enhanced the photo, and they realized it was the back of Alexander's head, and blood was running down his arm. Another photo was taken, and it shows Alexander's dead body. The police were able to recover another set of photos from the memory card. They were taken about 4 hours before the shower photos. There were 4 nude photos of Jodi Arias in Alexander's bed. There were also 2 photos of Alexander in the bed. After seeing the photos, a detective asked Arias about the camera, and she claimed she had never seen it or touched it. The police looked at Arias' phone records and financial records. They thought it was odd that her phone had been turned off around the time of the murder. When the phone was turned back on, it pinged off a tower in Arizona, about 200 miles northwest of Mesa. The police also thought it was odd that Arias used her bank card before and after the murder, but there was no activity on her bank account during the 24 hours when the phone was shut off. A bloody palm print was found on the wall of Alexander's bathroom. It turned out that it was Arias' palm print, and it was a mixture of her blood and Alexander's blood. On July 15, 2008, about 5 weeks after the murder, Jodi Arias was arrested at her grandparents' home in Wairika, California. After a week in custody, Arias changed her story. She admitted that she did go to Alexander's home on the day of the murder, but she maintained she didn't kill him. She claimed that two people, a male and a female, wearing ski masks, broke in and killed him. Arias said that they grabbed her purse and got her address from her driver's license. They told her to get out and not tell anyone what she saw, or they would kill her and her family. The detective she told the story to did not believe her. A few weeks after Arias was arrested, she was extradited to Arizona. In jail, while Arias was awaiting trial, she sat down for several interviews with different news organizations. This included national television programs like Inside Edition and 48 Hours. In the interview with Inside Edition, she said that no jury would convict her because she was innocent. In all the interviews, she blamed the murder on the two home invaders. But then, in the spring of 2010, Arias had a news story about what happened on the day Alexander died. She said that there were no home invaders. She claimed that Travis Alexander had physically and sexually abused her. She said on the day he died, she acted in self-defense and shot him. After that, she blacked out and didn't remember what happened. She said she made up the story about the home invaders because she still loved Alexander and didn't want to ruin his reputation. Arias' lawyers tried to make a plea deal on 2 different occasions. She would have pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for a more lenient sentence. The district attorney rejected the plea deal both times. The opening arguments for Jodi Arias' trial for first-degree murder started on January 2, 2013. If Arias was found guilty, she could have been sentenced to death. By this point, the case had attracted a lot of media attention. One thing many people noted was the change in Arias' appearance. The media had described her as a blonde seductress before the trial. But at her trial, she had brown hair and wore glasses. Several members of the media said she looked like a teacher or a librarian. At the trial, Arias' defense lawyers argued that she acted in self-defense. They said she was taking photographs of Alexander in the shower and then she dropped the camera. Alexander became mad at her for dropping the camera and he lunged at her. She had simply defended herself. The prosecution had several of Alexander's friends testify. They said that Arias had become obsessed with Alexander. They compared her to the character Alex Forrest in the movie Fatal Attraction. In the 1987 movie, Alex, who is played by Glenn Close, becomes obsessed and stalks a man and his family after a one-night stand. The medical examiner testified and said that the wounds Alexander suffered were extensive. It was more like overkill than self-defense. He said that Alexander was probably stabbed in the heart first, but this didn't kill him right away. He tried to get away, and as he did, he was stabbed some more. It was only when he was lying on the floor either dying or already dead, that he was shot in the head. Jodi Arias testified on her own behalf. Arias admitted that she had killed Alexander, but she said she had acted in self-defense. She claimed that Alexander was controlling and she had to do whatever he wanted. She also said he forced her to do demeaning sex acts. Arias also alleged that Alexander would become violent with her. She claimed he pushed her, slapped her, kicked her, and even choked her. Then, Arias accused Alexander of being a pedophile. She claimed she caught him masturbating to a picture of a young boy in briefs. Many people were disgusted by this accusation because there was no proof to support it. Alexander's home was searched thoroughly and no pictures or videos of underage children were found. Alexander's friends and family were disgusted by Arias' testimony because not only had she killed him and showed no remorse for it, but now she was trashing his reputation. Arias testified that Alexander became mad when she dropped the camera. She said that she shot him in self-defense and then blacked out. She did not remember doing anything else to the body. On cross-examination, the prosecutor painted Arias as a liar who was not to be believed. In total, Arias spent 18 days on the stand testifying. Jodi Arias' trial lasted 4 months. The jury deliberated for 15 hours over 3 days. She was found guilty of first-degree murder. She ended up being sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. At the time of this video, Jodi Arias is 40 years old and she is serving her sentence at the Arizona Department of Corrections Perryville in Goodyear, Arizona. Number 1. Harvey Glatman's photo collection. Harvey Glatman was born in December 1927 in the Bronx, New York. From a young age, he showed disturbing behavior. Notably, when he was just 4 years old, he liked to choke himself with a rope while he fondled himself. When Glatman was 10 years old, his family moved to Denver, Colorado. In junior high, he was teased because he had buck teeth and bad acne. Glatman was highly sexual, but he was terrified of girls. Instead of talking to the opposite sex, he stayed in his room and he obsessed over pornography he had collected. He soon developed fantasies of humiliating and torturing women. When he was 12 years old, he started breaking into people's homes. During one of these break-ins, he stole a handgun. After stealing the gun, he followed several women home. Then, using the gun, he forced them into their bedroom and fondled their breasts. Over the next several years, Glatman was a peeping Tom. When he was 17, he got a bit bolder. He began approaching women on the street and pointing a gun at them. He would take them to isolated areas and undress them. He would then steal their purses and run away. He also started breaking into apartments. In May 1945, when he was 17, he was arrested breaking into the apartment of a woman. When he was arrested, the police searched him. He was carrying a length of rope and a .25 caliber handgun. He was charged with robbery and he was released from jail 3 days later after his parents paid for his bail. A month after he was arrested, he kidnapped a woman and drove her to a nearby canyon. He fondled her, but he did not rape her. Afterward, he dropped her off at her home. The woman went to the police and looked through mugshots. She identified Glatman and he was arrested again. Once again, he was released on bail. He ended up being sentenced to jail for a few months for the robbery charges and for assaulting the woman. In August 1945, while in jail, 17-year-old Glatman saw a psychiatrist. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. In August 1946, he attacked a couple in Denver. He was armed with a cap gun that looked like a real gun. He tied up the young man and then sexually molested the woman. After attacking the couple, he fled to Albany, New York. Once there, he attempted to sexually assault a woman, but she managed to get away. Hours later, he found two other women and tried to sexually assault them. They also managed to escape from him. All three women went to the police and reported the attempted assaults. 2 days later, Glatman was arrested. He admitted he tried to sexually assault the first woman. In October 1946, he was sentenced to 5 to 10 years of prison. He was released after serving 2 years of prison and he returned to Denver to live with his parents. In 1952, Glatman discovered a mail-order business called Nutrix Publishing Company. They sent its members photos and cartoons of women in bondage. Glatman became obsessed with their imagery and sent them most of the money he made. Glatman soon got himself some camera equipment. He then hired models to pose for him in bondage scenes. After his first successful photo shoot, Glatman did more of them. In June 1957, Glatman moved to the Hollywood area of Los Angeles, California. He started taking a TV repair class and he got a part-time job servicing televisions and radios. Glatman was happy with his previous photo shoots in Denver, but it wasn't exactly what he wanted. He wanted to photograph a woman who didn't agree to be tied up. He wanted to see the fear in her eyes. On August 1st, 1957, Glatman arranged a photo shoot with 19-year-old Judy Dahl. Dahl was using her maiden name, Van Horn, for her modeling career. At the time, Dahl was divorcing her husband and he was fighting for custody of their 14-year-old child. Judy Dahl was an in-demand model who usually didn't do photo shoots with strangers, but she agreed to work with Glatman, who was using the pseudonym Johnny Glenn. Glatman picked her up at her apartment and took her back to his apartment. When they got into his apartment, he took out a length of rope and he told her he was going to tie her up. He told her that the photos were for a detective magazine. She reluctantly agreed to be tied up. After Glatman tied her up, he took some photographs. He then started fondling her. He took out a gun and he enjoyed how scared she looked. He then raped the 18-year-old woman. This is how 30-year-old Harvey Glatman lost his virginity. He then had Dahl sit with him on the couch and watch TV. He then took more photographs of her in bondage. When it got dark, he drove her out into the desert, 130 miles from Hollywood. He forced her to get out of the car and he tied her up. He then took more photographs of her. Then he had her get on her knees. He tied one end of a rope around her ankles and then tied the other end around her neck. He pushed her down on her stomach, then he pulled up on the rope while he kept his foot on her back. This caused the rope to tighten around Dahl's throat, strangling her. When 18-year-old Judy Dahl was dead, he buried her in a shallow grave. When Dahl didn't come home that night, her roommates, who were also models, reported her missing. Dahl's remains were found on December 30th, 1957, but the police didn't know it at the time. They just knew it was the remains of a woman. In March 1958, using the name George Williams, Glatman joined a dating service. Through the service, he met 24-year-old mother of two, Shirley Bridgeford. On March 9th, Glatman and Bridgeford were supposed to go to a Western dance, but he convinced her to go on the drive and talk. Glatman drove 90 miles to Oceanside, California. Glatman parked in an isolated area and he tried to get physically intimate with Bridgeford, but she was not interested. Her lack of interest turned Glatman on. She then demanded to be taken home. Glatman started driving, but then Bridgeford realized he was heading in the wrong direction. He parked in another isolated area and forced her to get out of the car. He then pulled a gun on her. He made her get undressed and then he raped her. Afterward, he had her get dressed and then he forced her to get back into the car. He then drove to a remote area near Vallecito, California. He got her out of the car and bound and gagged her. As the sun was coming up, he snapped several photographs of Bridgeford looking terrified. He then strangled her in the same manner that he killed Judy Dahl. Shirley Bridgeford was reported missing when she didn't come home. In July 1958, Glatman found a freelance pinup model in the classified section of the newspaper named Ruth Mercado. Mercado was 24 years old. She had her own studio in her apartment where she would pose for professional and amateur photographers. Glatman set up an appointment with her on July 22, 1958. But when Glatman showed up, she said she wasn't feeling well, so she canceled the appointment. The next night, Glatman showed up at her apartment armed with a handgun. He forced his way into her apartment. Once inside, he tied up Mercado and then raped her. Afterward, he led her out to his car. He then drove her out to the desert, not far from where he killed Shirley Bridgeford about 4 months earlier. He kept her alive that night and throughout the next day, and he took several photographs of her in bondage. He then drove her over 30 miles to the Carrizo Plain. Once again, Glatman strangled his victim by tying a rope around her ankles and around her throat, and then pulling on the rope while stepping on her back. He then hid her body in some brush. In October 1958, Glatman called a model who had set up her own studio. The model got an uneasy feeling from him and chose not to work with him. But she did suggest a friend who was desperate to get work as a model. Glatman got in contact with her friend, 27-year-old Lorraine Vigil, and he offered her a modeling job. She accepted the offer. Glatman picked up Vigil on the night of October 27, 1958. Once they were outside the city, they parked on the side of the road. He pulled out a gun and tried to tie her up. But Vigil started screaming and fighting with Glatman. She grabbed his gun and it went off. The bullet grazed one of her thighs. Vigil continued to struggle and she managed to get the driver's side door open. They both spilled out of the car. Vigil continued to fight for the gun, and after biting Glatman's wrist, she got the gun away from him. She aimed the gun at him and pulled the trigger, but the gun had jammed. Then, a police officer on a motorcycle pulled up on them. 31-year-old Harvey Glatman was arrested. After he was in custody, detectives searched his apartment. They found the photos of Judy Dahl, Shirley Bridgeford, and Ruth Mercado. When Glatman was confronted with the photos, he confessed to the murders. He then led them to the bodies of Bridgeford and Mercado, and he told them that they had already found Dahl's remains. In December 1958, Glatman pleaded guilty to the 3 murders. On December 18, 1958, he was sentenced to death. 10 months later, on September 18, 1959, 32-year-old Harvey Glatman was executed in the gas chamber in San Quentin prison. It's suspected that Glatman murdered other women besides the 3 he was convicted of killing. One possible victim was only known as the Boulder Jane Doe. Her dead body was found on the banks of Boulder Creek near Boulder, Colorado on April 8, 1954. It appeared she had been savagely beaten. In 2004, her body was exhumed and the medical examiner determined she had been hit with a car. In 2009, 55 years after her body was found, she was identified as 18-year-old Dorothy Gay Howard. Howard had disappeared from Phoenix, Arizona a few weeks before her body was found. Investigators suspect that Glatman ran her down as she tried to escape from him. At the time of Howard's murder, Glatman was 26 years old and he was living in the area and he was not in prison. Glatman was questioned about her murder after he confessed to the murders of the other 3 women. He denied killing her and any other women. He said, "Aren't 3 enough?" Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, if you are looking for something new to watch, why not check out my new channel, Chapter Dark. The videos are mysteries that you can try and solve. Do you have what it takes to solve these mysteries? You can find a link to Chapter Dark in the description box below. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.